Yo, what's up guys, and welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be talking about Firestone work orders, and I'm going to try to break them down for people that don't understand them, mainly for people that aren't technicians at Firestone, for mainly the customers, so they understand the work order and what everything means on the work order and everything that you get once your car is serviced at Firestone. So you're going to get two papers, well, three. You're going to get one that's blank, got nothing on it. You're gonna get your overview of everything that was done to your vehicle, and then you're also gonna get the work order that the technician filled out. Okay, so on your overview, you're gonna have everything gonna be all over here. It's gonna have the bold letters are the specific services that were performed. Like mine, as you can see, it says got an oil change and a courtesy check. And it's gonna say that if your battery tested good or marginal or replace. It's gonna tell you what oil filter was used, what kind of oil was used, and the labor cost. And it's gonna just break down the expenses here. And you can see what everything costs over here, and it's all broken down. And courtesy checks are always free. It's always a no charge. And then your complete total is going to be here for parts, labor, and the service, and shop supplies anyway, and then your tax and your total overall. But this is pretty self-explanatory. And then the top right of your overview is just going to be your car details, like your make and model, whether your car was gas, what size engine was in it. But yeah, so that's your overview. If you have any questions about that, leave it in the comment section below. I'll try to explain anything that you guys still need help on to the best of my ability in the comments. This is the more weirder part of what you get. I understand, like, if people don't understand this. So this top section right here, it says courtesy check. All right, it's gonna have your make model, it's gonna have the VIN to your vehicle, it's gonna have the mileage to your vehicle right here, and then over here is gonna be your license plate, your engine size, and whether your car had any wheel components missing, like center caps or like a lug nut or anything like that. Windshield cracked, self-explanatory. They're gonna mark down whether the windshield was cracked, and if it was, we'd put it down in the notes where it was cracked. And same with the wheel, we'd write down what was missing and on what wheel. Also, you got scratches and dents. Scratches and dents should always be checked, because every vehicle, no matter what year it is always going to have scratches or dents somewhere. And then you just write down whether a warning light was on, if it was manual or automatic. And we don't really mess with what kind of engine, or really the warning light. We write down if the check engine light was on, we write that down. If the TPMS light was on, we write that down. If any kind of lights were on, it's going to be in the notes section here. So moving down a little bit, you got maintenance, services, and starting. This portion over here is your courtesy check. This is the courtesy check. And with a courtesy check, and I'm just going to tell you what we check with courtesy checks, and it's we check your wiper blades, your headlights, your mini lights. That's including like the brakes, turn signals, the license plate lights, and the parking lights that you have in your car. We check your air filter. We check your cabin air filter if your car has one. We check your PCV valve. Most Firestones, nobody checks your PCV valve. I'm sorry, but like, they pay 0.1, which is 6 minutes for a courtesy check. So if it's 0.1, we're not going to spend that much time on it. We're going to check everything over, take a look at it, but we're not going to take out everything and then check it like that thoroughly, because that'd take way more than 6 minutes. That'd be like, what, 20-30 minutes of just doing the courtesy check, and no one's going to do that. I'm sorry, but it's not happening. And then we also check your wash fluid. We top that off with every single car. We check your oil level. Even if we're doing an oil change, we check the oil level and make sure it's good, tell you if there's any leaks, if it was low. We check your power steering fluid. We see if it's gonna be, we just check if it's low or not. If it is low, we'll add some and just notate it, and then it's up to you guys to decide whether or not you want us to go into further detail and try to find out why it was low. And that's with all of these mainly. We only write if it was low and by how much, because we're not going to sit there and diagnose the vehicle and then not have you buy it and waste our time. We check the master cylinder fluid level, and then we check the brake fluid level. Also, we have test strips for the brake fluid and the coolant, and it tells us what the copper corrosion level is in your brake fluid, and then for your coolant, it tells us how the pH level and something else. Oh, and it's the heat index. So we also check your transmission fluid. We just check it, make sure it's still red, and make sure it's still on the dipstick if your car does have a dipstick. Not all cars do. So we check again your coolant level, and we can recommend an exchange for the coolant, or also we can recommend an exchange for the brake fluid. It's just flushes. We'll flush your system and then put brand new in if it's above spec. Like for here, brake fluid, you have different levels of copper corrosion level here, and if it's either 300 or 200, we recommend a brake flush. We'll suck all the brake fluid out of your reservoir and then bleed the lines, well, not bleed them, but drain the lines, and then put brand new fluid in and pump it back up. And then we also check your coolant hoses. We check all of them. We just squeeze them, make sure they're not super soft, of course. We check your belts. We just basically pull on them. If they're too loose, recommend a tensioner. If not, leave it go. And we also check for fraying. We'll recommend a belt if it needs a belt. We test your battery, and we check out your battery terminals. So the battery test is based off of cold cranking amps. So, and that's right on the battery, and our tester will test it and tell us if it's within what you need to start your car. And even if your car does start, it doesn't mean that your battery's not close to the end of its life, because your battery can still start off of a portion of the cold cranking amps, but it's just getting to the point where if you leave it on accessory mode for like a little too long, it might not crank over anymore. And with a brand new battery, you can leave it on accessory mode for a good like hour, 2 hours, couple hours, and the car will still crank over. But if you did that with a partially drained battery that's always partially drained, it's only going to last like maybe an hour, and then you won't be able to start your car. And then another thing is battery guard right down here. Your battery guard is just, we do corrosion, and if your terminals are corroded on your battery, we'll recommend a battery guard. And basically what we do is spray a battery cleaner on it. We scrape off the battery terminals with a wire brush. After that, we do it to both the positive and the negative. And then after that, we wash it off a little bit and spray the red protective layer over the terminals so they don't corrode anymore. Now moving over, we got everything to do with your tires. So you got from here over is courtesy check, and from here over is everything to do with your tires. So up here, you got your tire size. That's just the tire size on your car. Over here, you got the speed and load rating. Speed rating, it all depends on how fast. Speed rating is basically how fast you can go with your car before your tire starts to like warp out of proportion, not be a circle anymore. Like once you hit a certain speed, your tire will start to indent itself as you're moving, and which could be really bad. It could blow your tire up. Same with the load. Load rating is basically like how much you can put on the tire with that speed and still be good. And then you got run flat and whether the tire has TPMS or not. So run flat is basically a tire that when it does go flat, it doesn't sit down on your rim isn't going to be sitting down on the ground. It's going to keep form, but it's just going to have no air in it, and it's good for up to 50 miles per hour at 50 up to 50 miles at 50 miles per hour. So that's run flat, and then TPMS, of course, is the sensor inside your wheel. Then you also got tire pressure in and tire pressure out. Tire pressure out is what your tire pressures are when we pull it out of the shop. Tire pressure in is what your tire pressures were before we pumped them up. Over here is tread depths, and these are all 30 seconds of an inch, I think. 30 seconds of an inch, that would make sense. These are all 30 seconds of an inch, so 8s and 7s, like you can see here, this is my car. 8s and 7s are still good. Your tires are still good. But once it gets down to about 5s, once your tires are 5s, we usually recommend getting tires soon. Same, and over here, you'll see little lettering. It says edge wear, cupping, cuts, irregularity. You got cracking, nails, and with the nail, if it's repairable or non-repairable. So if you got a nail in your tire, we'll mark nail. If it's repairable, we'd mark repairable. If it's not repairable and you need a tire, we'd mark non-repairable. And with edge wear, mark it if it has edge wear, so on and so forth. Down here you can see that we can recommend tire maintenance, an alignment check, and then complete vehicle inspection. We'll recommend tire rotate if it's off like this. If you have different tread depths for your front and rear, we're going to recommend a rotate. It's just to keep them trying to keep them the same, so you buy all 4 tires at once, so you're not buying 2 tires and then like 3 months later you have to go out and buy another 2 tires. Also, if you don't rotate your tires, your rear tires will start to become not a circle. It'll start to become like a dodecagon or decagon or something like that. I don't know. It's got sides. If you don't rotate your tires, it eventually starts to get flat spots, and that's not good. It's going to create like a rumble. It'll also if your tires get too worn on the sides, it'll start to create like a wheel bearing noise, and you'll think it's a wheel bearing. It's not. Moving on. You got maintenance services is starting again, but this is with the CVI. None of this is going to be filled out. Any of this is going to be filled out unless you have a CVI on your ticket. If you have a CVI, that's when we fill out everything on this ticket, including everything down here and everything over here. If you don't have a CVI, we don't check it. Now with a tire rotation, we do check the brake specs. We check the millimeters. We check how thick your brake pads are in the front and the rear when we take off the tires, because we can instantly look in and check them out for you, and we do that. But let's say you did buy a CVI. This is what we would go over. Okay, all down here, this down here, and this over here. And we'll start over here and I'll explain that, and then we'll get over to the other side. So with a CVI, these are some of the things that we're going to check. We're going to check battery starting and charging test. We don't do that unless you request it. That's not part of the CVI that we'll do. Anything that has a green box but it's not open for a check mark or anything like that is something that we don't check on a CVI. It has to be requested for us to check it. So we'll check your belt tensioner, we'll check your valve cover gaskets, see if they're leaking oil. We'll check your power steering hose, make sure it's not leaking, make sure it's not frayed, make sure it's not like melting in any spots or hard. We'll also check your exhaust system. Now, we don't patch exhaust systems. We don't do any welding or anything like that. We'll replace whole pieces of exhausts. So we'll take a giant chunk out of your exhaust, anything that's like can be taken out by bolts. We won't cut your exhaust, none of that. We're gonna take a portion out and put the new portion in. That's what we do. We check your U-joints, your idler pitman arm, idler/pitman arm. We check your center link, we check your bushings for your control arm, your sway bar. We check link pins, we check tie rod ends, we check ball joints, we check rack and pinion assemblies, We check the CV boots, we check the struts and the shocks. Now the rack and pinion, again, it's a thing like you got to request us to check it. We're not going to check it on a CVI. So the belt tensioner, we just pull on your belt to see if it's loose, and if it is loose, we're going to recommend a tensioner. For the valve cover gasket, we check if it's leaking oil. If it's leaking oil, we're going to recommend it, because if it gets too bad, if you got 2 valve cover gaskets, you got a front and a rear, and if your rear gets too bad, it's going to start leaking oil into your spark plugs. There we go, spark plugs. If it gets too bad, it's going to start leaking oil into your spark plugs, and you don't want that, because your car won't start if oil does start leaking into your spark plugs. Your power steering hose, we just check it, and if it needs to be replaced, if it's leaking anywhere, we're going to recommend it. Your U-joint, your joints anyway, it's underneath your car. It's hard to explain. I'd have to do a whole video on it if you really want to know. If you guys, again, I'm going to say it, if you guys do have any questions, leave them in the comment section below, and I will answer them to the best of my ability. And if I can't answer them, I'm sure someone out there watching this video probably can. So don't be afraid. If you have questions, leave them in the comment section below, and they will get answered. But yeah, your U-joints, we check them by shaking them, or like if they can move by us shaking them, they need to be replaced, because that's us with our arms moving them. It's not like rotating. Yeah. Your idler and pitman arm, we just check those. If the bushings are bad or anything like that is bad, we're going to recommend it. Your center links, recommend them if bushings are bad. Any of the bushings, again, if any of the bushings, like on your lower control arm or sway bar, is shot and we're able to move it with our arms, like our hands, we recommend it. I just had a Buick in here that needed a bushing for a lower control arm, and we sold that, so that's cool. But anyway, we check your link pins, I call them sway bar links. I don't know, sway bar links. We check your sway bar links. We also check your tie rod ends by shaking the tire side to side. If there's play, we're going to recommend it. Also, if you want an alignment, we check the front end first. So if your tie rods are bad, any of your ball joints are bad, if your CV boots are bad, CV axle's bad, we're not going to do an alignment. Anything to do with steering and suspension, if it's bad, we will not do the alignment, because there's no point in doing the alignment, because that part that has gone bad is probably causing the alignment to be out. So get that replaced and then get your car aligned. We check ball joints by shaking the tire up and down. Sometimes we'll have to put a jack underneath the control arm to take weight off of it and then shake it. But we basically just look to see if there's play in it. If there is play, we're going to recommend it. Your CV boots and joints, we just check, see if the CV boots are torn. If they are torn, we're going to recommend them. If there's play and the lost slap, we'll recommend it. Your struts, if they're leaking, if they're super rusted, we'll recommend them. Same with your shocks. If they're super rusted, we're going to recommend them. That's everything. That was everything right here. Everything. So if you got any questions, leave it in the comment section below. We're going to move over to brakes and rotors. So we're going to measure your brake pads with our tool. It just tells us how thick they are by millimeters. These are all in millimeters. You're hardly ever going to see something down there. We only write up here. If they get below a 4, if they are a 4, we're not going to recommend them. If they get like anywhere between 0 and 3, we recommend them. And then over here, we'd mic your rotors. We take a micrometer and clip it to the rotor and see how thick your rotors are. And if they're in spec, we don't worry about it. We can still turn them if you do need pads. But if they're out of spec, we recommend rotors and pads. You are going to have an actual measurement which is this top one here, actual measurement. And then you're gonna have what we can machine it to without it being too close to the discard. And the discard's when you need new rotors because they're too thin. And that's gonna be with the rear and the front. If you have drum brakes in the rear, we'll beat off the drum and measure the thickness of the shoes, brake shoes. And that's going to be totally different than what you see here. Like an 8, you'll never have an 8 for a brake shoe. The highest it's going to be is a 3. And that's like brand new. Anything below, I think it's a 1 is what we would recommend. Or a 1.5 or something like that. Or 1.2. Somewhere like that, something like that, we'll recommend it. But it takes a very long time for your brake shoes to wear down that far. A lot of cars, they'll go to the junkyard before their brake shoes are even changed. And then for here, we can recommend a rear clean and adjust. And that's just for your drum brakes. Like I said, we check your brake hoses, recommend brake hoses if they're leaking or if they're too rusted. Your parking cable, we check that to make sure that your emergency brake still works. Make sure it's still clicking on and clicking off and all that fun stuff, because some of them will get stuck in the on position, then you're wearing down your drum brakes. And then we can also recommend anything like the hardware for your calipers, because they can cause a squeaking noise if they haven't been changed. And a lot of places will just reuse the old hardware, which is really bad, honestly. It's good to just replace it with the brand new hardware that comes with the pads already. So I recommend replacing the hardware if you're doing your own brakes. And we can also recommend calipers, wheel cylinder, and yeah. That is the Firestone work order. I will go over one other thing, and that's this down here, because this explains any numbers or check marks or letters that are in all of these. So if you see a 1, the number 1 in any yellow box, it means that it's close to the end of its useful life. If you see a 2, it means that we're trying to address your need, request, or convenience. So like if an air filter needs changed, something that isn't necessary, we'd put a 2. If it doesn't comply with a manufacturer recommendation, we'll put a 3, and we don't use 4. 4 is technician recommendation from experience. We never use that because no one has that. No one should be that confident to where they're like, yeah, from my experience, this is what's wrong. Like, no. And then if you see any letter, if you see the letter A in any of the red boxes, it means that that part no longer performs its intended purpose. And that just means that it's not doing what it's supposed to anymore. Say like one of your windshield wipers is falling apart. You'd put an A. Well, actually, you'd put a 1 because it's close to its end of useful life. But if the blade's completely gone, you put an A because the windshield wiper isn't doing jack shit anymore. If you see a B, it means it doesn't meet the design specifications, which means it's not the right part. C is missing, it's just gone. You don't have it. Like, it's not there anymore. That is the end of this video for Firestone work orders. If you have any questions, again, leave them in the comments section below. I'll try to answer them to the best of my ability. I'm sure everybody watching this video probably could answer, or at least answer one of the questions that you may have. So just leave it in the comments section below, and if I don't answer it, someone else will. Thank you guys, and peace out.